And we're live. Hopefully tonight, fingers crossed, it goes better than last night. We had some technical difficulties last night. I tried rebooting it a couple of times, and it still was not working out. Our internet connection was not doing very well. We tried moving like an amplifier extender or something to figure out if we can get, more power generated in this area. So we got our fingers crossed, and hopefully all that goes well. But tonight, what I want to do is cover what we were going to cover last night, and I'm sure the thing was all spotty and everything, and not working out very well. So last night we were talking about the tune, the thing that always falls out that people blame, all of that stuff. So the tune, I did a video, and we showed differences in tuning on a naturally aspirated motor, because it doesn't really matter what it is. This particular one was a carbureted small block. And then also we did some tuning on a turbo LS to show you the difference, what happens with different levels of timing. And there's interesting stuff there on both sides. So we'll start out with, we'll try to recap on that, and then we'll talk about the video that I'm working on now that's coming up. And there's going to be lots of videos coming up, so you guys be prepared, because we're going to be loading up stuff a lot. On the tune, the interesting thing on the comparison that we did, and we did this test for the guys at Engine Masters. Actually, it was an episode of Engine Masters with Freiberger and Dulcich, and so thank you guys for allowing me to use some of the data. But we ran the small block Chevy, and then what we did was we wanted to show what a big sweeping change in air fuel does, and then what big sweeping changes in timing do. And the reason that he wanted to show this, I'm sure that he gets the same kinds of questions that I do. And whenever I post a video up, and like if I post a carbureted one, whether it's a small block Ford or big block or whatever it is, people always ask me the same thing. Well, what was your timing like? How much timing did you run, and what was your jetting? And I'm like, well, I can try to look that up, but if it's a test that I ran 15 or 20 years ago, we might not have that data. But if I did, I could try to tell them. But if I don't have it, really, I did these tests to show that even if we ran 78 jets or a 78 and an 82 split or whatever, that even if you didn't run that, you would still be really close, especially on air fuel. Because if you miss air fuel by one air fuel point, you're talking about a handful of horsepower. You're not talking about very much. So we wanted to show what happens, and the best way to illustrate that is not to go, okay, well, we put too much jet in and it was at half an air fuel point richer, and so look what happened. What we showed was, Freiberger, bless his heart, let's take a big swing at this thing. So what he did was, we went from like 75 jets to 100 jets. He wanted the thing not to just be a little rich. He wanted it to be like all the way rich. And so as it turned out, doing that in the carburetor that we ran on this 383 small block, going from 75 jets to 100 jets, which is basically the biggest ones that we had, changed it from about 12.5 to 1 down as low as 9 to 1. So the lowest, because on a carbureted motor, you typically have some sort of weird curve going on in the air fuel. It's not perfectly flat and consistent. I think that the lowest point was 9.1 to 1. And that the leanest that it got was 9.7. So still solidly in the nines, which is an area that nobody would run, especially a naturally aspirated motor. If you run a boosted motor in the nines, you could get away with a lot more and still have it work. But most NA motors, carbureted small blocks, most guys wouldn't tend to run them at 9 to 1 air fuel. But we did. And the thing is, it was down on power, certainly, but not by a ton. I mean, I think it lost like 40 horsepower or something. Let's see here, that's the timing. Yeah, so we only lost about what is equivalent to maybe 10% of the power by changing it more than 3 air fuel points. So it was a big change. And what we're illustrating, and what I wanted to illustrate with the video, is that you can be off by a lot, but the thing still runs and drives around. I mean, I don't know, you'd want to be idling it around and driving it at part throttle. If it was 9 to 1 at part throttle, I'd be much more concerned with it there than I would be with the thing being 9 to 1 at wide open throttle. But the thing took throttle, it loaded at 3,000 RPM, it went through the whole curve. It didn't like just bellow out black smoke like I thought it was going to. But the thing is also that, and this is one thing that a lot of guys don't realize, is, and one of the points I made in the video, is that when everything else is right, like the timing was right and the rockers were all tight and there was no vacuum leaks and everything was sealed up and the rest of the combination was right, it had a dual plane, it had a mild cam, and it had all the things that it needed. So when everything else was right and you missed by one thing, even when you miss by a lot, like 3 full airfield points. It wasn't, it didn't kill the motor. It didn't make it stop running. It didn't make it spin backwards or do anything like that. So you could be off by a lot. So if you're only off by 2 or 3 or even 4 or 5 jets, it's not going to have a dramatic effect on the power. Like if you're off by 1 airfield point, you might not even see it change in the power, at least on the dyno. I mean, when we run it at 13.0 and then run it at 12.0, we might not see but like a couple horsepower. There are so many times when we've put a motor on the dyno and run it, and it's like, oh, it's 11.8. Oh, yeah, it's an NA motor. It's 11.8. We're going to make a lot of power here. And then we put it up to 12.5 or something, and I'm like, man, that was like 4 or 5. That's not the 20 or 30 that I was hoping for. But since going from 12.5 to 9-1 was only about 40 horsepower or so, we know that when we're closer than that, and the big gains are going to be from 9-1 to 10-1, and then less from 10 to 11, and even less from 11 to 12, and then nothing from 12.5 to 13. So the other test that we did on that NA motor, and it made even more a bigger difference in power, was big changes in timing. So that motor wanted to run best. It made best power according to the dyno at 36 degrees of total timing. It had a set of aluminum blueprint engine, they're aluminum heads. And so we added timing like we do, and 36 degrees kind of seemed to be the number. There wasn't a big change. And we showed that, like, we ran 36 degrees and then we ran 31 degrees, and there was only like 6 horsepower difference between those two. So one of the points that I made in the video is that for me, I probably would run it closer to 31 than 36 because I don't really care about that extra 5 or 6 horsepower. But that 5 or 6 degrees gets you away from having too much timing, having detrimental problems, having detonation and that sort of thing. So I'd rather have it be a little bit more on the conservative side and then give up a couple of horsepower, but make it safe. So then we went from 31, and then we took big swings at it again, like the 9-1 air fuel thing, from 31 degrees down to 21 degrees. So when you do that, 21 degrees on an NA motor, that's nowhere near optimum timing, but yet it still ran and took full throttle and did all that stuff. And the power went from, like, it made 461 at 31 degrees. At 21 degrees, it made 408. So, that knocked a bit out of it. I mean, what did that knock out? 53 horsepower. So that's a lot from timing. But if you think that's a lot, when we knocked out the next 10 degrees, we went from 21 to 11 degrees, it dropped down to 318 horsepower. So taking the timing from 36 degrees to 11 degrees knocked out like 150 horsepower. So it was a lot. I mean, it was a big change. That's like 7 or 8 pounds of boost. But so you can have a big effect on timing. And the interesting thing, if you look, and I know that you guys do look, real specifically at the different spots on the timing curve and the power curves, you can see that it had more of an effect on power at the top of the RPM range than it does from the torque peak and down, because from the torque peak and down, the combination actually wants and will make power with less timing. So when you do a timing curve, there's usually less there and then more on the top, because as you go up in engine speed, it needs more timing for maximum cylinder pressure to happen in the right piston position and stuff. And so you have to have it happen earlier, because then it will happen at the right time on the other side. So they need more timing with RPM. So when you take that away, it has a bigger detrimental effect. We lost 150 horsepower. But we didn't lose. We lost less than, we lost about 110 foot-pounds of torque or so at the peak, and then less down low. And we had a locked timing curve on this. It was just 36 basically everywhere, because our figuring is that if you have a performance distributor and you have a carbureted application and you have a performance curve in your distributor, it's going to be all in by 3,000 RPM. That's pretty typical of a carbureted application on a performance deal. You would have all the timing in. So we ran it from 3,000 to 5,500 or 5,800. And so all the timing was in. So it was 36 from 3,000 all the way out. So when we take it away, like I said, more of a detrimental effect on the top end than on the bottom end. And my point was, when we're looking at this NA stuff and you look at how much power you lose from the timing, that now, if you're putting boost to it, is now your new starting point. So you're looking at an NA motor that makes a whole bunch less power at that timing level that you had to run when you put boost on it. Now with boost, it's going to want less timing anyways, and you're always going to do that to keep detonation at bay. And the flame travel is going to be faster and all that stuff. So it's going to want less timing. But this is something to pay attention to, especially for the guys running pump gas and running a whole bunch less timing, because you have to be safe, but you're also going to make quite a bit less power than you would if you had E85 or race gas or those kinds of things, and you had the optimum amount of timing in it. The other thing on the other side of that, and I got questions on, well, what happens when you run? We know what happens when you run too little timing, you lose power, or when you run it too rich, you lose power. But what happens when you run it too lean, or you run too much timing? Both of those things are bad. Especially too much timing, you'll kill the motor in very short order, because you don't have to miss by too much on the timing for detonation to happen, and then subsequently really bad things happen. And especially under boost, if you miss the timing by 1 or 2 degrees under boost, you can easily kill the motor, because if you detonate the motor under boost, it's more catastrophic, and then bad things are going to happen. Same thing with, it's a little more forgiving if you run it lean, like if you were to run it, if you were to run it instead of 11.5, you're going to run at 12.0, it's just going to make really good power. But it's getting on the spicy side. But if you go into the 12.5, 13.0, 14-1 or whatever, it's not going to be making power there. If you have enough octane in it, you can get away with that for short periods of time. But for long periods of time, if it's too lean, what happens is you'll heat the thing up, you'll scuff the pistons, and then it will break. So that's why we don't do that kind of testing, because we know that that's the bad side. That's the dark side of tuning, is the too lean, too much timing for too long, too bad, that kind of thing. So you don't want to go there. You don't want to go to the dark side. On the test that I did in that video on turbo timing, we varied the timing from 18, 20, 22, and 24 degrees on a turbo 4.8. We had good gas in it, so we knew that we could get away with this. We also had an air-to-water intercooler. We also had low boost. It was less than 7 pounds. And we showed what the difference in power is. And again, I do that for the pump gas guys, even though we're running either race gas or E85. The guys that are running pump gas have to look at doing that, because they're definitely going to run less timing in that combination than you would if you have 100 octane or 110 or 100 C16 or whatever it is. And if a guy's running around on 7 pounds of boost, he's probably not going to be running C16 anyways. I would hope that you would do E85, because it's it's so much less expensive than race gas. But if you have enough octane, we can show the different levels of timing, how much power each one is worth, and that way a guy can look at that and go, okay, well, I have to run pump gas, so when I look at that and I have to take away this much timing, I'm going to see obviously detrimental changes in power. And especially when you get down to the really low levels, like we saw here, like on that NA small block, when we had the timing down around 11 degrees, you were 150 horsepower off from where the optimum timing would be. And that would be not unusual to see that also on a turbo application, where you have to run, 10 or 12 or something degrees of timing, because you're running it on 91. And if you had good gas in it, especially if you had E85 in it, because you're going to make more power anyway. But if you had good gas in it and you had the timing in, because like we would easily run 20 or 22 degrees of timing on something that only had 6 pounds in it with an intercooler. And we had cold air going into the turbo. It would want all of that. And that's where we would do it. But obviously we would take timing away as we went up in boost. And the discussion last night a little bit was about some of the guys running. I got some comments from the video they said, well, what is your opinion of guys running, very low double or even single digit timing levels on some of these stock bottom end motors that are out? And their reference was to a guys setting the records. I said, well, obviously they know what they're doing, because they're setting records. So I'm not the guy to tell them that they should do something different. And also, you have to look at that from two perspectives. One is that they're making it work, so they should do what they're doing, because it already works. But also, you might be wanting to take power away because it's a stock bottom end, and their limitation is not how much power they can make. Their limitation is how much strength the thing that they have that they're trying to make power with. So they may be purposely not trying to make the power that combination could make at that boost level, because they've taken timing away, and make it as safe as possible. And I think that those guys are really good. And I would really like to talk to some of those guys, because I think it's interesting that the balance between taking timing away to make it safe and then adding boost, I think you can kind of get away with more with staggering that. And that's something I actually haven't done a lot on the engine dyno. Typically, we try to run, more timing, a little more timing than a lot of guys do. We can get away with it on the engine dyno. Like when we ran the Big Bang stuff at 29 pounds, we had 18 degrees of timing in it. But the thing is also, we have ice water. We have cold air in the cell. The turbos are getting cold air. They have an open exhaust. We have way more turbo than we need. We're not worried about response. It's not in a car. Our charge temperatures are like probably 115 or 120 degrees, even at 29 pounds with our ice water going in there. So it's, and we have a good NA combination that's making lots of power NA, and then we're adding boost to that. So, we're seeing some fairly big numbers, and I think it would be interesting to find out if I brought the timing down by 2 or 3 or 4 degrees and then went up. Obviously, if I had a 4-bar map sensor in that instance on the 6-liter, and see, kind of where the balance is. Because I think, and especially if I would juggle those kinds of things if I knew that I had like excess intercooling, for instance. So if I had an intercooler that could keep the temperatures there, even if I went up another 3 or 4 pounds, I might do that and see what happens versus, the 2 degree timing, 2 degree pound, or 2 pounds boost kind of thing, that sort of trade-off. Because you're probably more likely going to hurt the motor with excessive timing than you are with running another pound or 2 of boost, especially if, as you're adding boost, you're taking timing away. So that's our discussion today, and that's what the video was about, the one that I posted yesterday. So that worked out good. That was an interesting test. I was amazed at how big a swing that we took at that small block Chevy, and I've run the turbo testing and blower testing on the LS stuff endless times, because the reason that I have so much of that data is that whenever we run those motors, I always run them. We start them off with whatever the lowest boost is, whatever the wastegate is. Usually it's about 7 pounds. We start them off rich, on the rich side. We have good gas in it, either E85 or some kind of race gas. It almost always has an intercooler. And even if I'm running without an intercooler, we always start with the intercooler and make sure everything is safe as it can be, and then go backward to non-intercooled, and then would take the necessary timing out and that kind of stuff. So it's as safe as it can be, and then we tune from there. So we start off rich with less timing, and then I'll start subsequently, once we get the air fuel dialed in, then I'll start adding the timing. So we may start at 15 degrees or something with E85, with an intercooler, with cold air, all of that. And then we'll go up, okay, so let's try 16, 17, 20, whatever, and then get up to the numbers where it's making peak power. And then we stop at somewhere in, like this time I went to 24. I don't think I normally go that high. I might at 7 pounds with the 85, but normally in the low 20s is kind of where we go. And then start having it come down into the teens as we go, as we go up and boost. That being said, on the first Big Bang stuff, I'm sure we ran 20 degrees at 26 or 28 pounds on those combinations. And the thing is, the original Big Bangs, the 4.8 and the 5.3, did not have ice water with, they just had regular water with the intercooler. So there was a lot of, there was obviously a lot left in those combinations. I kind of would like to redo a 5.3 like that and see what the 5.3 would do, and make some big numbers with that. And then maybe I could experiment with the boost versus timing kind of thing and see what's going on there. But the video that I'm working on now is I'm comparing the 5-liter, the OG 5-liter Fox body motor, to the motor that replaced it, and that's the 462 valve motor. And what I did was run stock ones. We ran modified ones, basically heads, cam, and intake. And then we also ran them both with, in this case, we ran centrifugal superchargers on both of them. So it's an interesting comparison between the two to see what kind of power that they make in each one of the instances, and it works pretty well. So that video will be the next one coming up. So that will be cool. I'm, I've owned both of those. I still own the 5-liter Mustang. I've also owned a non-PI Mustang. I think mine was a 96 or 97, and we did a bunch of stuff to that. I was stupid and tried to get the thing to make 300 horsepower at the tire. with a non-PI combination without putting PI heads on it. They had to be non-PI heads that could be ported and stuff. And so I had to go through all that rigmarole, and that was that was not a good choice. I should have just told people what I knew from the beginning is just swap a PI motor in there. You'd be a lot better off. It end up making a lot more power. Or, like I said, with the ones that I did on all the engine dyno testing is just do a hybrid deal, do a non-PI short block, which I had. I even put a new one of those in there, took out the 250,000 mile one, thought, okay, great, we're going to pick up a bunch of power with short block. No, we put the brand new one in. It didn't do anything. So I thought that was going to make a lot of power, but I should have just retained the non-PI, put ported PI heads on it, put a good PI intake manifold on it, and away we went. And we could have easily made way more power than that. We could have been closer to 400 at the tire rather than 300, but it's a live and learn kind of thing. And then it was really fun when we put a Kenny Bell on it, and then it made the fun kind of power. Because before, when we put the cams in it, we had those 274 cams in it. And I made my own intake manifold, and that worked well. We put ported non-PI heads on there, which were not that great. But the thing with those cams was a lot softer down low, up to maybe 4,000 than the stock cams were. So it was just it was not nearly as fun driving around like that. Even though we were making quite a bit more power, it was just not very zippy. But once we put the Kenny Bell on there, it was then it had all the tire spinning torque that you could possibly need. So that was an awesome combination. I wish wish that one was still around, although it did have a rear end howl that again, I think that the rear end was it had a lot of miles on it, so it was kind of probably getting worn out. All right, so that's what's coming up, and that's what we wanted to talk about last night. I apologize, I don't know what happened with the internet connection, but we're doing better now. So let's see what kind of questions you guys have got. So Mike, you want to see Big Bang 454 and 460? The 454 will definitely come first because we're almost ready to do that. David Freiberg has been nothing but nice to me. He's really, really knowledgeable. I think a lot of people don't realize that about him. It was kind of cool working on the piston flip thing that we did to watch him and Dulcich too. But mainly David go down the rabbit hole on trying to figure out and get as much information as he could on all of the different changes that were associated with changing the pin position on that Dodge test that we did on my junkyard motor. And it was awesome that he would do it, but more than just doing the test and looking at the data, he wanted to know all the theory behind it. And so he, I called Billy Godbold and talked to him for quite a while about it, and we kind of came to the same conclusion. But I said, look, you need to talk to Billy. He's got some good information. And then he went even further. He talked to other people from Molly and JE and all kinds of different people about this to try to understand everything that was happening, so he could talk about every different aspect about changes in acceleration rate, before and after top dead center, and thrust loading on the major and minor side, and all the different things that go on with that. And I salute him for doing all that work. And you'll see it if you guys watch Engine Masters, that episode will be coming up, and he does the whiteboard talk, and it's some guys will know what that is. And he really kind of gets into it, which I think is great, because you can never have too much information. I think turbo junkyard big blocks above 1,000 horsepower grenade. Well, we've been a lot higher than that already with the big block 454, so we know it's beyond that. The Coyote motors are great. I mentioned this in the video that I talk about. I give a little shout out to the Coyote guys in this 5-liter video that I'm doing right now. I've never got 1,500 horsepower from a Gen 5 454. The 1,540 horsepower number is from the Gen 4 6-liter. The most I've been on a Gen 5 or a Gen 6 454 was 1,100 or 1,200. Boomers love the kidney pill. I know back when the original GT350, like, you know, the really cool ones, not that the new one's not cool. I mean, a flat plane crank, all that, that's cool. But the original one, 65, 66, and I actually don't like the 67 and up GT350s. That's just my personal opinion. So I like the 65 and the 66. And I remember my dad telling me a story about a guy back in the day, that a buddy of his, that really made everybody mad because he bought the GT350. It was either a 65 or 66. I'm thinking it was a 65. And he took the 289 out of it and he put in a 365 horse 327 Corvette motor in it and trans in his Shelby Mustang. You know, and it's the same stories. Everybody, I used to beat everybody on the road. And it would be a good combination because the GT350 was very, very light. And that 327 would just kill a 289. I've tested both of them on the dyno, so I know what kind of power difference there is, and it would be night and day on that motor compared to a 289. Do block girdles help? A block girdle helps a different thing than the problem that guys have with the 302 blocks, because it splits in the other direction. So it doesn't split a main cap, it splits up from the mains up to the cam. 650 at 12 pounds seems low if it makes 482. So 480, because 10 pounds is, if you multiply, somebody do it really quick. I don't have my calculator here and I can't do it off the top of my head. If you multiply 482, even by 1.68 or 1.69, which is only 10 pounds, you come up with way more than that. I mean, the number that you're looking at there is going to be more like 8 or 9 pounds. So you're off. And there are a lot of things to consider. One is how much timing are you running? You may have knocked 100 horsepower out of it with just timing. If you're trying to do that on pump gas, that would explain it. A 4-valve 5.8 liter with the right piston, it can more than match a cleaver with less displacement. I've been wondering what, in your opinion, are the go-to turbos for a 5.3 for 800 wheel horsepower. That would be a 7875 from VS Racing, a Gen 2 deal like we have. An S475 would also do that. A GT45 is not going to do 800 at the tire if that's what the... Tim, the thing that those guys are referencing was that Mopar manual, the Bible that all the Mopar guys go by. And I was talking to Dulcich about it. He said there's so much in there that's wrong. A lot of the porting stuff in there is just all wrong. So it wouldn't surprise me if some of the other things are not accurate. And like I said, on our test, we saw nothing. I don't think that that's the ultimate answer, because I think that we could tailor other tests by running lower engine speeds, by doing a higher acceleration rate, maybe doing some testing on the chassis dyno from off idle, basically, to just whacking it and finding out what happens. There's a lot of other testing, but unfortunately for me, Tony flipped his lid and started saying all kinds of nonsensical stuff that none of which was accurate. Because I asked him that day that we did the test, to come on his show to talk to him about it and talk to him about exactly that, hey, look, we ran this test. I told him I was going to do it on his live feed when he had me on there. I said, I'm getting a Mopar. I'm going to test that. And I'm also going to do lots of other tests. But I told him I was going to do it. And then we did it. And he, like, you know, lost his mind and showed an awful lot about him. I guess I do need to do a video on the Truck Norris cam. What's your favorite? I don't have a favorite motor. I want to boost all of them. So anything, like if I get a hold of a quad 4, that would be awesome. All of the Honda stuff right now, I'm working on a K24. And we're going to big bang that thing. We've already run a bunch of boost on it already. And so I like the Honda stuff because it makes a lot of NA power. Like, it's really efficient just on the motor. And then so really good things happen when you add boost to that. It just starts multiplying itself. The Dodge, like, I'm really excited about running the Dodge also, the 2.2, but it's going to be starting with a whole lot less power, probably half of what the 2.2 Dodge will start out with, about half the power that a K24 starts with, I'll bet. What size turbo? For a 351 EFI intake from a pickup, I just want to add the turbo and leave everything stock. Maybe inject. You'll definitely have to do injectors because you have to have enough fuel to feed the extra power from the turbo. Hello from Mexico. You guys do some crazy stuff down there. I know some guys that do stuff down there, and there's lots of big power stuff happening down there. I would, for a 351, pick the inexpensive GT45, put an intercooler on it, put a good fuel pump in it, put big enough injectors in it, and then you could make, you can increase the power by 50% or something and drive around. It'd be great. Racing. So you're trying to run without, trying to get practice with no ABS or traction control. It's hard. I remember the first time I drove, and this was long ago. We were playing a game called Rush, which was really fun. And I always picked the Volkswagen van, which was awesome. But then we started playing a Formula One simulator. And I have a lot of driving experience. I mean, I won a professional road race championship. I could not drive the Formula One car around the track. I couldn't even do it. So it takes a lot. What sort of tuning steps do you take when testing nitrous? When we're doing nitrous on the engine, I know it's very easy because we'll do it a number of different ways. If we're doing it with a Holly or something like that, we can have the timing taken away with the nitrous activation because you could just program that in, and that's easy. If we're running a distributor motor, we can just move the distributor by 4 degrees and have it be 4 degrees off, and then activate the nitrous whenever we want. We can have it activate with nitrous and program it into the digital 7. But we do what they tell you to do is about 4 degrees per 100 horsepower. So if you're adding 100 shot, you retard at 4 degrees, and it seems to work out okay. A lot of times on 100 shot with good gas, we won't take any timing away. Charles, this is going to be a big change in low speed power between stage 3 truck cam and the Truck Norris cam. I don't know about the top, but I think Brian has that information up. I think he has that dyno information already available. Have you ever seen a broken main cap on a 2-bolt? I have not. And I've never seen a broken crank on a cast crank small block either. I've never seen anybody break the bottom end under power. I've seen guys break stuff under duress, detonation or whatever, spin a bearing because of lack of oiling or those kinds of things. But I've never seen anybody show me where they didn't hurt it in some other manner. I just make so much torque, I just push the main caps right off the block. I've never seen that. I honestly don't think that that's possible. If you're looking for fuel mileage and most of your driving around is not under boost, then I think you should run it on gas and just run low boost. Yeah, back in the day when we were doing stuff, we didn't have Sportsman blocks because this is before that. We had the A4 block or a Boss block if you could find any of those. But all the ones that you found, they all were split or they're broken because somebody had kicked a rod out. Brandon, I just added a water meth kit to my GT45 5.3, and now my boost is much more stable. I'm thinking it's because my IAT stay lower. Does that sound right? Yeah, you may have stabilized. If your boost is more stable, you may have stabilized the back pressure, which might be affecting your boost more than you think. A GT45 won't get close to 800 wheel horsepower. We've only been near 800 flywheel with it, and it took everything that we had. Flathead Ford. I've never run one of those, although like everything else, it'd be interesting. I've never put one together, but it seems kind of weird, but I'd like to see one. Yeah, Evan, I'm familiar with Evan. I wrote for him for a lot of years. He's a good guy. I'm familiar with his channel. Grant, we'll do a turbo on the Slant 6. Doc, I have no idea how much power that combination is going to make. There are a few things. The F1A94 can make 1200 or more. So if you can run everything that the F1A94 has to offer, a 6-liter with stock heads, are they 317 heads? I don't know what that toilet jam cam is. I have no idea what the specs are on that. But since you're running 91 octane, you're not going to make very much power because you won't have enough timing in it. We run 150 pound injectors on the Big Bang motors. A Scout 152 4-cylinder. I don't know that I've ever even seen one of those. I have a Slant 6. As a matter of fact, Freiberger just. Oh no, he asked me about the Chevy, the 292. What all would you do to a 462 valve? You need boost, so you'll see what we did on this one that made 600 horsepower. Have you sprayed your 4.8 with a 200 shot yet, Mike? Larry, your Excel DFI, the guys have made lots of power with those. As long as it will give you the right air fuel and timing curve that you want, you're golden. 4-point great. I thought they were 4-point hate. Did Tony ever turbo a slant? The last adventure I saw him talking about turbocharging, he had called me to ask me for advice, or said he was going to, and he never got it. But I think that they immediately broke it. He's not a super technical guy, and he's definitely not a forced induction guy. Doing a 5-liter stroker 2-valve, 30 over. They handle 800 horsepower. I'm hoping you're running boost, and actually, I usually don't recommend the stroker 2-valve stuff if you're going to do boost, because the boost will take care of any kind of stroke change that you're thinking about having. Intake gaskets, leave the crossover open or closed. I have 2 different gaskets, small block for 2-barrel to 4-barrel. So you have a 2-barrel to 4-barrel. Do you have an adapter or something? Is the crossover open on the head? Is it open on the head and not on the gasket? Is it open on both of them? We usually don't run EGR stuff if that's what it is. You busted a 5-liter crank. Detonation. Eduardo, get a GT45, the cheap, inexpensive ones. Richard, when you do videos on 4.6 liter, what injectors do you use? Well, since it's a standard Bosch style injector, just like a 5-liter, all of those injectors work. So we just put an injector that's big enough to work for the power output that we got. Like when we ran the blower on it, I think we ran 80 pounders in that. Does a 50 ounce or 28 ounce balance engine cause the block to crack? If you mismatch those, that might have a contributing factor. But I don't think that the balance, as long as everything's balanced together, is going to cause that. Although I don't know it, like second or third order vibrations come from the different balances. An 84 Corvette had forged pistons in it and a forged crank. What's a good nitrous shot? We've run plates at 300, but if I was going up with that much, I probably would do a fogger if that's what you're doing, an individual port fogger deal. Rob, you have 13 degrees of timing on your 5.3. Oh, it's 93 octane. I'm not really a tuner, so I don't know about the pump gas stuff. I think Matt over at Sloppy, his rule of thumb is like 14 and 14. So 14 pounds at 14 degrees of timing for pump gas is kind of a safe thing. I bet I could make 1,000 horsepower on a stock block through. Well, if you're just doing the block, or are you doing the stock bottom end? Well, if you think you can make 1,000 horsepower on a stock block 302, then step up, man. Do it. Dean, there you go. I'm glad you pushed the like button. Grant, I turboed a stock slant, 10 pounds, Phytech, and MSD. Nice. Ron, it might affect the timing down low. And also, if you advance it and it does change power like you want it to, just change torque, it's probably going to need more fuel. What are your thoughts on forced induction low displacement motorcycle engines? That's a match made in heaven, right? They all need that. We've done lots more than 1,000 horsepower in stock 460 blocks, so we know that it will do that. I've done lots of stroker 460s. Exhaust King, thank you very much. I'm trying to find out where I am here. 3.1 liter V6 in our Firebird. Excuse me. We're going to turbocharge it. How's the internals on these? I don't know about the internals on those. From what I'm seeing, they're fairly hefty. As always, on anything, I recommend putting ring gap in it, because that would be the first thing that will break. That will break before you break a weak connecting rod or a weak piston or crankshaft or anything else. You'll break a ringland from having too much heat in a ring, usually before anything. Some guys have told me that you might hurt a head gasket or something before that, but the head gasket had to be pretty bad, like the Cadillac one, for instance, before you hurt something else. So I would think that if you put ring gap in it, and then if there are head studs or something that you could put, we a lot of times search for other things. Once we find out what the thread is and the length is, you can find ARP has a bunch of other things that you can source and figure out and put together a combination where you can put head studs in it, and then good head gaskets, and then you can run it. Now, that being said, we've run boost on that motor in a Grand Am long ago, and we didn't do anything to it other than boost it. But we only put about 7 pounds on it, and we only ran it on the chassis dyno. The dart block is definitely good. So you want to, Admiral wants to see a 6.2. So Tim, how did the tune happen if there's no timing light and there's no jets and there's no reading plugs? Which, when you read plugs, you need to do it on a new plug. I remember somebody, when I was at West Tech, took the plugs out of one of my motors. He goes, "Yeah, we got to look at the plugs. We got to check them." I'm like, "Good luck with that. That plug's been in with 7 different kinds of fuel. It's been in that motor for, I don't know, 7 or 8 years. It's run NA, it's run boost. It's, so you're not going to be able to get a reading off of that thing." And also, when you run like the California pump gas, the thing gets all black and sooty. And it's not because it was rich. It was 12.9, but they get black deposits on them. The plug looks so much better when you run race gas on it. Yeah, Dean, I think ultimately, if everything else is right and you could get to the problem with that V6, that the crankshaft might ultimately be a problem, but I don't think at 7 pounds or anything it's going to be that's going to be an issue. Oh, stock 2-barrel manifold to a 4-barrel. Yeah, you can close it. I mean, they make gaskets that do that. You can close it, or if there's not, or if both the heads and the intake have it on there, I wouldn't run it through the manifold. I don't think I've ever run a nail head. I don't remember them. They had to have run one of those at West Tech at one time or another, but I've never seen it. I was told that the LT1 and the Corvette was a 4-bolt and that the other ones were 2-bolt, but I haven't taken a look at every one to verify that. With exhaust king with 7 pounds, but the problem is that we never stay at 7 pounds. If you get it all working right and get it working and it's running at 7 pounds, you know, if you have 7 pounds, you know, it feels really good, like 8 or 9 pounds. And then you get used to that and you're like, yeah, this is working really, really good. I can't believe how good it feels. It's got to like be okay at 10 or 11 pounds. And then that becomes 15 and then 20 and then it's broke. And that's usually what happens with turbo motors. Jay, you'll see exactly how much you're making when I put the video up tomorrow or tonight, whenever I do that. Because that's almost the same combination that we ran. We ran the 11R 170 heads. We ran their long runner intake manifold. We ran the Extreme Energy 274 cam, actually a stage 2 trick flow cam, almost identical. And then we ran a Vortec at it, and the Vortec was making, I'm thinking it was like 11.5 pounds. Just over 600. So let's see. Dart or World Product cylinder block. Both those blocks are good. I haven't done any AMC stuff. Yeah, it's going to be tough to read them plugs after you let it idle that long, huh? So I'll tell you what the idle mixture is. A Big Bang 6.2. .347, 32 ZM, A4 block, 9-to-1 compression. How much power? Well, the A4 block will handle all the power that you can put on it. Blow through, old school, aluminum high ports. What timing? I'm not going to tell you what timing to run because you need to run the timing that's going to make it not hurt itself. When we run that stuff, we ran the A4 block. I don't think I had my high port heads on it because that's what I ran on my Mustang. But I'm thinking we ran that thing made best power NA at about 35 degrees. And I think under low boost that we were running and good gas, I think that we were at about 29 or 30 at low boost. And then less than that at higher boost stuff. The 5-cylinder version of the Atlas motor would be cool. Thomas, there's no best cam for that. You just pick a cam that works. There's probably 1,000 good choices that you could put in there and they will work. The cam that you pick is going to be more a function of the RPM range that you want to run. Do you want low speed power? Do you want mid range, top end, and the other things that you're using? 110 LSA is fairly common for the guys at comp cams. That's what they put in a lot of their stuff. It's tight enough to make good low speed power. It'll have a little bit of a lumpy idle depending on how the rest of the specs on the camshaft. 110 LSA is not going to have a bad idle on a cam that's only 200 degrees or 205 degrees of duration at 50. On one that's 240 degrees of duration at 50, it's going to have a lumpy idle. You ran a SN 200 Paxton, 93 Cobra, 335 to the tires. That's good. The downside to the smaller exhaust, the smaller hot side, is that you get more back pressure. You get more response, but you get more back pressure. With a 460-inch motor, and the AR is not the only thing that's going to determine what the response rate of that turbo is. It's going to be however big the wheel is also. The L8T block, that would be good to test. Like I say, I'd like to try one of those motors, one of the complete motors. The NPI-PI hybrid deal is a good combination, especially for an NA one. It's a misnomer that a hydraulic roller makes more power than hydraulic flat tappet. I think that that's too broad of a statement because every hydraulic roller is not going to make more power than every flat tappet because the cam timing is different. Sean, that'll be a good combination. Let me know how that turns out. NPI short block with trick flow, track eat 262 extreme energy. I don't know why you'd put the trick flow heads and then that mild cam and the track heat intake. The track heat intake would allow you to make power on the 2-valve stuff because that intake manifold is actually a fairly high RPM deal. It loses power compared to the PI manifold down low. Which stock 302 engine is better? They'll both do the same thing. They're both the same displacement, so they'll both make the same power. The big concern is, are you going to want your accessories or you want your motor to be a 50-ounce balance, or are you going to build a roller 302 that's 28-ounce balance because your early motor is going to be 28-ounce? So think about that. Either one of those will make power. And as a matter of fact, the Boss 302 replica that I built was using a late model hydraulic roller block. SN 2000, okay. $25 horsepower gains from lifters. I'd like to see that. the NASCAR camshaft question is a lot like why does Top Fuel use the Roots blower? Because they have to. TrickFlow 268 cam on TrickFlow NPI 5.4 with a space. I've never tried spacers on using a 4.6 cam or a 4.6 intake combination on a 5.4. I've never tried doing that. Yeah, you can put in all of those blocks and cranks interchanged, Tim. Couldn't you gain 25 horsepower with a better lifter and better springs? The only power gains I've seen with springs are when you go into valve float. And we see very tiny changes in power when you go to more spring rate versus less spring rate, as long as the less spring rate still allows the motor to make peak power without valve float. $235, $252, $629, $600, $119 plus 5. That's not going to be a torque cam, Jeff. 119 plus 5 is not going to be a torque cam, and especially not a 235-degree duration. Sean, thank you very much. I don't think I have any videos up on the TrickFlow manifold. I think I do have a comparison between that and the PI manifold, though. Thomas, everybody asked that question. I have no idea what the answer is. What boost can you run safely on a small block Chevy with stock ring gap? You don't know, because you don't know what the ring gap is. And then you don't know how long you're going to be running that boost on that ring gap, because it's going to be temperature that you put in the ring that causes the thing to go away. So you can run it whatever boost you want right up till you can't, and then it breaks. Why do Gen 5 cam makers advertise VVT line of cams with data, then talk you into adding even with forged pistons with larger pockets? I don't know. Do you have enough? The reason that they're telling you that you have to limit that is because you have an available piston to valve clearance. So you have to limit the timing sweep, which still helps you, even if you limit it to only 4 to 8 degrees like you're talking about. An 8-degree swing can change power quite a bit. And if you have forged pistons with more valve relief, so you have available piston to valve clearance, you probably can get away with more. 4-pattern cams, no. 4-pattern cams don't cure the problem with the intake, which is what they were trying to do. Guys are buying tie bar short travel race lifters claiming 25 horsepower, 500 RPM gains. Now the short travel stuff, we did see gains doing that, because what you're doing is getting rid of a lot of the aerated oil in the lifter. And so you're making the lifter on a short travel lifter, you're making the lifter, when we did the same thing with longer push rods, by depressing the lifter, you're getting rid of a bunch of that aerated oil. So the lifter is acting much more like a solid roller lifter than it is a hydraulic roller lifter, because it got rid of most of the hydraulic part of that. So that can make your cam timing much more precise, and you can pick up power, which we did. When we made it into a short travel lifter, essentially by putting a longer push rod on it, what happened was we got more aggressive cam timing. So it lost power down low and picked up power at the top. Jeff, you think 119-degree LSA is going to make a lot of torque? Take a look at the LS9 cam tests and tell me what you think. Admiral, if you have a 4-cam motor, if you can advance and retard each of those cams individually, good things can happen. And also, if you have a double over cam, you have a 4-valve deal that has 4 cams in it, you're probably going to have the right intake manifold on it. And all the intake runners are going to be the same length. So you don't have to have a 4-pattern camshaft. That's not necessary anymore. IRA, that's not, it's not just ramp rate. Cam stability is more than that. And it's not just spring rate. It's a combination because it's a frequency thing. So the cam and the springs have to work together harmonically, not just like with extra spring pressure, holding it down and making it, you're going to do what I say. That's not what's happening. And you see that stuff on the Spintron. You'll see things get unstable that have, and they can get unstable, and you can add spring rate and they can get more unstable. And that's not a good thing. So ramp rate's part of it. What effect on power have you seen on turbo back pressure on the extreme end? Yeah, 3-to-1 is going to lose power. I don't know how much that is, but it is definitely going to lose power compared to only having 1-to-1 or even 1.5-to-1. I learned about the color tune. I'm thinking that you're referring to the change in color of the ground strap or the porcelain, right, on the spark plug. Do you think Johnson short travel lifters can do 9,500 RPM? I don't know. That's a range that I've never run. Hydraulic roller stuff. I think when guys are doing 9,500, hydraulic roller stuff is usually replaced by a solid roller. On a completely different note, what would you think about a dual cam pushrod motor? I don't know how to visualize that. The coolest pushrod motor you need to look at is the Chevy Ilmor Indy car motor. Is it hard to become a mechanic? How much schooling do you think? No, it takes time, but it takes experience too. So the more you apply yourself, the more you can learn, obviously. Mike, welcome. And I have about 2 minutes. I got to get going. Yeah, Thomas, your daily driver can be turbocharged as long as the tune is right. It obviously there's lots of factory turbo motors out there that drive every day and last 100,000 miles or more. So you can do that as long as the tune is right. It will last a long time. Color of the flame in the combustion chamber. So you can, how do you see the color of the flame in the combustion chamber? I think visually seeing it would be, I think I would want a pressure transducer in there would probably tell us what we want to know. But David Vizard's done some really cool stuff. So if you guys haven't watched his stuff, I'm sure all of you guys have. If you haven't taken a look at his stuff, he's really good at porting stuff. Yeah, the Mercedes-Benz Ilmor motor. The Code spherical rotary engine. Yeah, that was at SEMA for a long time. What's his name? Billy Godbold did a really good discussion on why that thing can't work. I mean, it rotates and spins and stuff and probably would run, but why it won't work for like we think it will. I'd like to run a 401, but on an AMC, but it probably would be more likely a 360 that I would find. Didn't they also make 390s? An LS7 lifter with a hydraulic roller stuff will go to 8,000. There's lots of YouTube stuff up there to help teach you how to understand more about how an engine works. But you start at the very beginning with what does an engine do? I mean, what happens when the pistons go up and down? Especially learn about cam timing, because that's very important. Yeah, Edward, a hydraulic roller cam. I know that people are going to disagree with this, but I would use a hydraulic roller cam if I was trying to make that kind of power. I think it will make more power than a flat tappet version does. What's a safe compression ratio to run on Forge 5.3 with pump gas on a Magnuson blower? You should keep it at 10 to 1 or less. It'll make your tuning window much bigger. I have heard of people using Coyote rods in the 4.6, but I've never tried it. Have you seen Gen 3 exhaust valves fail under boost? No, but they were not designed for that. So if you're running sustained boost for a long time, if you failed an exhaust valve, it was weak to begin with, or the tune's way off. So Dean, I can find a 401 in a Jeep. Can you do it? 304. Can you do a real one and see what it's really capable of? The 304 is not a high RPM motor, so it's going to be more like that Jeep that those guys did. But that thing made a lot of power. It just took a lot of boost to get there. Jack, you can find for a 1.8, if you have a small displacement motor, there are lots of small displacement factory turbos out there that you can do. The problem you'll find with a lot of, and this will be the last question because I got to get going, but the thing that you'll find, Jack, is that while there's lots of turbos available from the wrecking yard, usually the flanges on those are really weird. If you look at the flange on some of the VW stuff, the Saab turbo stuff that we used to get them from, you'll want to find something that has a standard T3, or you're not going to find a T4 on that, but a T3 flange or a T28 or a T25. And that's something that you can find or make exhaust manifolds for. A lot of the really weird stuff, you'll have to just make your own flange to adapt the turbo to it, or just run, you might be able to, flame cut a flange out and then just run a tube and make all that work. But sometimes getting one of those turbos and mating it to your engine, that's one of the hiccups is it's hard to do because they use a weird specific flange for their exhaust manifold from the OEMs, but they do a good job, and we're happy that the OEMs do factory turbo stuff, because that makes life easier for us. Then we can just turn up the boost and make more power. Thank you guys all for showing up. I will be back tomorrow. I'm going to hopefully get this video up so it can post real early tomorrow morning, and you can take a look at the 4.65 or 5 liter versus the 4.62 valve stuff. And then we got more stuff coming after that. Thanks for showing up, guys. I will see you all tomorrow.